Welcome to our winter release event. My name is Michael Greenwich. I am the founder and the CEO of WorkOS. Really excited to share a bunch of things with you this morning that we've been up to and working on. So let's just jump right in. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you have questions throughout this or comments, there's a bunch of people from WorkOS here in the chat. So feel free to just open up at the bottom, the little Zoom chat. You can ask questions and connect with the team either then or later. All right, so today's agenda, here's what we're going to cover. So first of all, we're going to do a quick recap on why WorkOS, why we're building this product, why this company exists. And through that, we're also going to talk about something that we call the enterprise chasm, a very, very common situation that a lot of SaaS companies get into. Just to give you some backstory on why we're building this product and sort of how we think about the larger ecosystem. So we'll do that as a quick recap, and then we're going to talk about some new features and enhancements that we've been working on. There's a bunch of new things that we've shipped over the last few months. We're excited to overview. And in particular, today we're announcing and launching our Multifactor Auth APIs. This is a brand new API for introducing multi-factor authentication into your app. So we'll include live demos for all these new features, including MFA. And then at the very end, we'll wrap up with a fireside chat with Daniel, who is the CTO and co-founder of Drata, a compliance company helping lots and lots of organizations go through SOC 2 compliance and other stuff. If you've ever been curious about compliance, and how that fits into the world of enterprise SaaS, or just curious about rapid hypergrowth companies, this should be a really fun conversation. So make sure to stick around for that. So a lot of stuff here today. Really excited to jump in. Okay. So let's start here with a story to talk about why WorkOS exists. So imagine that you are a company building SaaS. Many of you probably watching this are, and you're building some kind of new workplace app. So something like Slack, maybe Airtable, Asana, one of these B2B productivity apps that you're delivering through the cloud as a modern SaaS app. Probably the way that you get users and the way you launch this is through a bottom-up motion. So you launch it on something like Product Hunt, and that adoption spreads through word of mouth. It spreads through other means of people sharing it, through viral growth, and you get users through that. Many people call this now product-led growth. And then probably at some time, individuals start paying for it, and then maybe you even get some small teams to start paying for it. So you start growing your customer base to have larger and larger folks on board. So you're eager to grow revenue. And like most of these companies, probably what you'll do is approach the users at the larger organizations and try to sign bigger deals with them. So those small teams grow and grow and grow. Suddenly you get users at big companies and you want them to sign deals. You probably start hiring a sales team or thinking about how you're going to grow into these bigger organizations. And if this sounds familiar, it's because it is the same strategy as pretty much every modern SaaS company, whether you look at Dropbox or Slack or Asana. Even larger companies are trying to move to this motion as this bottom-up PLG type of motion. So this is a very, very common scenario for most SaaS companies. But typically something will happen here is that big potential customer you're talking to will say, hey, your app is really great. We're ready to buy it. We're excited to use it. A bunch of people at this company are using it. Here's our standard vendor app requirements. Here's what we need in order to actually deploy it. And for most companies, this is very confusing and results in a big puzzle. They send you a big, long list of features, and many of them are things that you don't necessarily have. And those could be functionality, pieces of functionality in your app. They could also be things around compliance, maybe like a vendor security questionnaire. But generally, there's a lot of stuff that you just haven't addressed. Even though you've built a great app that they want to buy, they get stuck. They can't buy it. And we call this the enterprise chasm. So if you're in the situation you've been kind of facing the enterprise chasm. The transition that's happening here is that previously your end user that was the buyer is no longer the buyer. Now it's someone in IT or procurement or security, some other group. And that user, the enterprise IT or CIO, they're the gatekeeper for selling that deal, and they have a totally different set of needs. They might need something like SSO or SAML. They might need something like SCIM provisioning, like a directory integration. But suffice to say, they need more features and kind of different features than what you've built for those end users to get them to adopt your product. So there's a new persona here. And unfortunately, these enterprise features are not usually very exciting to build. They're hard to integrate. And the things that have drawn users in at that point doesn't satisfy enterprise IT. So those shiny product features that end users got excited about are not what IT gets excited by. They want something like SAML and usually a lot more. And if you're thinking, well, maybe we'll just only sell to SMB companies, I have an unfortunate truth in that enterprise features are now actually required by even small and medium businesses. They're not really enterprise exclusively. This is due to like the unbundling of workplace tools, a ton of new apps getting built that IT needs to manage. And effectively, enterprise features are showing up downstream. So in these smaller organizations, you've probably seen something like single sign-on as a feature. Companies that are even smaller than 50 people are requesting, SSO in their product. So you unfortunately, this is something that you'll need to have, even if you're looking to expand just beyond really small teams. So you can kind of think about enterprise features as a day one requirement for cloud SaaS. Notably, these enterprise features, though, are also the fastest way to increase your revenue because you're able to go after these bigger contracts. And perhaps in an environment where it's harder to raise VC capital, it's a really straightforward way, in a sense, to go after bigger customers and close more revenue with the same product. So there's a lot of value in doing this. There's a lot of value in getting these features, and they're kind of prevalent everywhere. The problem with this is that building them is time consuming. So you have to integrate with legacy protocols, things like SAML, SCIM, all these different systems. There's dozens of integrations with a lot of proprietary systems. So even though SAML is like an open standard, there's tons of different vendors you need to plug into. It turns out to be extremely complicated. Onboarding your customers becomes confusing. This usually results in needing to hire a post-sales customer success team. Just the complexity of connecting somebody's SAML instance is really hard. And you can't really put junior engineers on this. So it's not just time consuming, it requires your expensive engineering talent. If you think about building your enterprise authentication feature, you probably need to have a more experienced engineer do that. And usually when people build this in-house, it's a constant investment. The first version's brittle, it inevitably will break. And when it breaks, it's with your largest and most important customer, at that point. So it can be pretty frustrating. So usually companies have just, before today, stumbled through this and had to build this in-house and dedicate a tremendous amount of engineering resources to it. But lastly, engineers just don't like building this. You don't join a company necessarily to build the SAML integration. You join it to build Airtable or Asana, the actual product feature itself. So sometimes it's hard to even motivate teams to do this. So this entire problem, what I'm describing, is why we built WorkOS. This is kind of the context what we're trying to solve. And WorkOS you can think about as kind of like Stripe for enterprise features. So it's pre-built enterprise features and functionality, including the UI that you can just drop into your app and start using. It's focused on developers. So this is created for developers with really nice APIs, modern SDKs, things like webhooks for real-time integration. And the shape of the WorkOS product is that it allows you to seamlessly integrate across all these different fragmented enterprise IT systems and also HR systems. So that HRIS and IT kind of service layer that an enterprise organization might be using, WorkOS can plug into all of that. So it's an infrastructure product, but you can think about it as product layer infrastructure. So it's not running your app for you. It's helping connect your app to all these different systems. Just like Stripe does, for the financial world, or perhaps Plaid does for something like SMS and telephony. So in effect, WorkOS, what it enables you to do is cross this enterprise chasm and get those customers. And at the end of the day, unlock that revenue, unlock that enterprise revenue, and allow you to expand and scale. And this can be pretty transformative for companies. When you're at that cusp of having product market fit, but not having captured all the revenue, just a few of these features putting in can really overnight accelerate your growth. So that's WorkOS. That's why we're building it. Today is actually the 2-year launch anniversary of WorkOS, literally to the day. 2 years ago in the morning in 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, we launched WorkOS through just a post on Hacker News, and a few tweets, and did really well. That was the start of all this. So even though we've come a long way since then, it's kind of fun to remember it's only really just been exactly 2 years. And today, WorkOS is already powering the next generation of SaaS. This is just a selection of some of the companies that we're powering authentication and other features for, SSO, directory sync, things like that. I'll talk about just in a second. But these companies have integrated WorkOS, and in many of them, at the point they integrated WorkOS, were a lot smaller, and it accelerated their growth into the enterprise. Many of these have become unicorns after integrating WorkOS. So we're thrilled to be working with these types of companies and just really excited to support a really wide ecosystem of different customers. And this is just a few. There's a lot more. Also, we had the honor last week of being voted #1 on the Enterprise Tech 30 list. We don't usually go out and celebrate things like this or chase after awards or such, but I think it's just a great sentiment and or testament, I should say, to how much this product is needed by that, specifically the B2B enterprise SaaS world, and by the type of customers that we're serving today. So we're thrilled by this and by all the people who have supported us from early on. So for all of you maybe listening here or knowing those logos, those early supporters, thank you so much for your support and trust in us in the last 2 years. We have built a lot of stuff, and we're thrilled for the future ahead too. So that's WorkOS. That's why we're building what we're building, kind of where we got started and where we are today. Okay, so really quick recap here too. This is the WorkOS product lineup today. We're going to talk about new stuff, but I want to just give a really quick overview of what we're serving customers with today. There's really 3 things. The first is single sign-on. So if you need SSO in your app, come to WorkOS, plug in our SDK. It takes like an hour or 2. Literally, it's super, super fast. And that day, you can be onboarding enterprise customers. This works with all the different identity systems that are out there. It works with Okta and OneLogin and Ping Identity and Microsoft and dozens of others. And it's powering enterprise auth for a lot of companies today. So if you've ever wanted SSO or been scared to build it, give us a not even give us a call, just sign up and do it. There's no excuse. Second feature here is directory sync. This is really used for user provisioning and deprovisioning automatically. If you've ever heard the term SCIM, S-C-I-M, that's one of the directory APIs, the connectors under the hood. But our directory sync service works with also HR systems. So things like Workday, Bamboo HR, Rippling, many different HR vendors as well. So this lets you have real-time creating and removing deprovisioning users inside of your app. This is a very common IT requirement now, is that deprovisioning step. And directory sync makes it really easy to plug in and have that real-time behavior through webhooks inside of your app. And the third thing here is something called the admin portal. This is used for setting up and configuring the integrations between things like SSO and directory sync. We'll show a little bit of this in the demos, but essentially this is the UI that you give to your customer, the IT admin. So you don't need to have a customer support team or customer support rep, manually go out and email back and forth things like certificates or configuration files. It's really a soup to nuts end-to-end configuration experience that takes something that typically could be hours or days or hours into literally just minutes. Like people set up SSO within 5 minutes, so it completely smooths out the experience, and it's pretty slick. Yeah, a lot of people very, very much like it. So this is what we're offering today. We got a lot more stuff in the pipeline, and I think we should talk about some new stuff. So let's jump right in. Okay. So there's 6 things we want to talk about today that are new, enhancements and new features in our platform. First is new SDKs. We'll talk about that really quickly in the developer experience. We'll also talk about some new integrations that we've launched. Also talk about some new roles in the dashboard for expanded usage. Then we'll give some demos around setup links, custom attributes, and dynamic SAML. And then we'll talk about MFA as well, a big new product. It's a lot of stuff. Let's jump in. Okay, new SDKs. So with WorkOS, we really strive to build a experience that's native around your integration. So if you're a developer plugging in WorkOS, we don't want you having to curl kind of like raw S endpoints or build around. We want the developer experience to be really, really incredible. We've built many SDKs to date. We've had these 7 so far: Node, Python, Ruby, Go, PHP, Laravel, and .NET. And we're really excited to launch our Java SDK. Now, Java may kind of stand out here maybe as being the least exciting one. Certainly in the world of modern developers building apps, people aren't jumping for Java for building new web applications. But there's a tremendous number of apps integrating WorkOS that have been around for a few years, that have product market fit, and are looking to modernize and connect to the cloud. And so for those customers, we're super excited to launch this Java SDK. It has the same level of polish and experience that we have in all these other framework and platform level SDKs, and just really, really thrilled to roll it out. So if you haven't used one of our SDKs or tried it out, I definitely recommend checking out our docs and cloning it. It's very easy to get started. We spend a lot of time in the developer experience too. And so not only do we have SDKs for specific languages, but we actually have example applications and tutorials for specific frameworks. So for example, if you're building in Python, we have a different experience to walk you through if you're using something like Flask or if you're using Django, and really go into details of how to integrate with those frameworks. So definitely check that out. If you're getting started, it's super, super easy to plug in. Build something like SSO in a few hours and get back to building other features in your app. That's what we hope for. So that's a new SDK. We have 32 example apps now, which is a lot. So example apps for almost everything you're trying to do, whether it's integrating the admin portal or directory sync or SSO. We've updated our docs with all these examples, and our example apps also now use session management. They have a session management feature inside of it, so you can see really how the authentication gets tied together into tracking those user sessions in your applications. It's really end-to-end integration and experience. So definitely check those out. They're all open source on GitHub, code that's just free for you to use. Okay, cool. Let's talk about some new integrations. So WorkOS, you can kind of think about as an integration platform. You plug into WorkOS once, and then we do all of the heavy lifting to connect it to all the different systems used by IT organizations in the biggest companies. We're really thrilled that in the last few months we've launched many new SAML providers. And you might think, like, why do you need to launch new providers? Well, SAML as a standard, even though it is a standard interface, you can go read the spec for it. All of these vendors implement it slightly differently, and the spec is not really formally specified in a way to make it easy to build a one-size-fits-all. And so we have worked with our customers and also these vendors, these systems, to really rigorously test our integration with them over the last several weeks and several months, and connect it in a native way, whether that's Salesforce or Oracle or Keycloak or these other ones listed here. We also have documentation for setting this up inside the admin portal, so it makes it really effortless for your customers, those enterprise IT admins, to connect their system regardless whatever provider they have. And we continue to launch these and adding them every month. So this isn't an exhaustive list of what's coming up. We also can connect to any SAML system, but these ones have the docs and are really smooth. So we're thrilled to have launched these over the last few weeks. And these join many other providers that we have today. So you can see that's not just the ones. Here's a bunch of different systems that we've connected to, and we're constantly growing and adding to this list as WorkOS expands. So pretty much your enterprise customer, whatever they're using, it's going to work with WorkOS. Similarly, we have launched some new directory providers. These are new SCIM integrations with directory data providers. So Bob here is an HR system that's pretty popular outside the US. OneLogin, Ping Federate. These are systems that also provide single sign-on, but now have started providing directory integration too. And CyberArk, which you might not have heard of, but actually is also popular in the enterprise. There's a lot of different systems like this that are still used by legacy organizations, or I should say just, established large companies, perhaps not legacy. Excuse me. If you work in Silicon Valley or work at a startup, you probably use something like Google Auth or Workday or something like that, or perhaps something like Okta for your user management directory system. Okta is very popular with cloud native tech companies, but it turns out once you get kind of outside the bubble of the tech world, there's a lot of different systems out there, especially for directories. So we've been hard at work integrating them, testing them, making sure you can just set it up. And the experience once you integrate your app is no different. You just plug it in once and you keep getting these new updates and providers. WorkOS keeps getting better and better. Again, those are not the only ones we have. We are adding these to a growing list of many different HRIS vendors and IT systems used for directory, like Breathe HR, Rippling, Fourth HR. These are systems we've already had in place for quite a while. So this list will keep growing. Probably at some point, we won't be able to fit all the logos on one slide, but we are hard at work continuing to expand the platform and have a lot more planned. So those are the new integrations, new directories. Just wanted to call out a customer. This is Joel from Gatsby. If your developers are familiar with Gatsby, the self-guided onboarding as part of the admin portal was a big win for them. He said, by using WorkOS, our engineering team was able to quickly add a whole host of SAML integrations with self-guided onboarding for our customers. It's been a huge win for us. And we're thrilled to be supporting Gatsby as they really go up market and start selling to bigger and bigger organizations. Okay, Let's talk about this new role for customer support. It's kind of a mouthful. What do we mean here? Well, WorkOS is a developer platform. You can think that typically we're serving developers that are, adding an SDK to their app, getting their API keys, plugging things in like that, viewing API logs. That was kind of the first purpose of the WorkOS dashboard. And we rolled out a lot of changes around that last year. What we found is that now with so many new customers coming on board, there's a new person using the WorkOS dashboard that's not a developer. And that's the person on your team that's helping support your customers, typically some kind of customer success or customer support rep. Whether you're selling a design tool or a recruiting tool or maybe a chat tool, you'll still have a customer support person on an ongoing basis talking to your biggest clients and maybe needing to occasionally debug stuff. So inside of the dashboard, what we've done is launch a new role for customer support users, which does not allow them to change configuration that could break kind of your whole installation. So configuration around your environment, change API keys, things like that. It's scoped down, and this will allow you to add a lot more users to the WorkOS dashboard to be able to debug stuff. So you can kind of grant further access to it. So previously, the two roles we had were admins and developers. Essentially, admins were able to manage users, and developers were not. And both of them, everyone was able to configure environments, change API keys, manage resources, do everything under the sun. And now we've launched this new support role, and the support role cannot configure environments. It can only manage connections and directories, can only manage the configuration of those individual resources. So it's essentially safe to give your wider customer support team or anyone at your company access to this, to be able to go in and get access to those logs and to be able to debug stuff. So kind of a small change, maybe a new role, but actually it's pretty transformative for companies that are scaling and growing really quickly with WorkOS. And that's what we've seen. People plug in WorkOS, they think, oh, the development team will start using this. And then 6 months later, they have, like 100 companies using it through WorkOS, 100 customers using it. So we're really, really excited to keep supporting kind of the expansion effect and supporting this new group that's using the dashboard sometimes every day. This is the experience going in, just as a quick screenshot. So when you're adding a new member, you can choose which role they have. You see right at the bottom, it says support. You can also change it later on. So if you accidentally add someone as a developer or want to move someone to support, you can do that as well. For those of you that previously have had WorkOS environments, you can just go into the settings for your workspace, update the permissions on users, and be good to go. So that's a new support role. You get some more granular permissions. You can easily reassign users, move them around. And to be clear, this also works with both your sandbox and your production environment. And so when you're in sandbox and you're developing, you can also give support agents access to that in the support role. Great. Let's talk about the admin portal setup links. So this is a brand new feature that we launched a few weeks ago. And this is specifically for people setting up and configuring SSO, and specifically being able to send a link. So I'll talk about the old experience and the new one. So the old experience, or I should say it's still a current experience. If you wanted to launch the admin portal for someone to set up SSO, you would need to programmatically generate a setup link and then redirect the user to that link. Most developers, the way they do this on their back end is just generate that link, have a button when the user clicks it, and then they redirect to it. The session expires in 5 minutes, and it's a really seamless experience. You can have a little button that says set up SSO in your app. The downside of this is you have to write code, and you essentially need to broker the authentication in the admin portal based on the user signing in to your product. And if you think about it, IT admins sometimes actually don't really need to use the app that you're selling. Say you're building a design tool, and you have a team of designers using it, you need to have a way for IT admins to be able to get into that design tool to set up single sign-on or set up SCIM. They might not actually need an account in the design tool. And so this gets a little complicated around sharing those links. So we've come up with another solution for this that we call setup links. And the way this works is that instead of this pattern where you're generating the link, you're able to actually generate the link within the dashboard itself. So you can go to the dashboard, click generate link, and then you can just copy it and essentially paste it into an email through this. It's accessible for a whole month, so you can put it into an email. It can get shared with IT. Maybe that design manager can send it to IT and procurement to set stuff up. And it ends up becoming essentially a no-code solution to setting up things like SSO and setting up directory sync, breaking out of needing to write that code inside of your backend. This is really, really helpful for customer success reps that are onboarding big enterprise customers, handling maybe a post-sales motion. And we've already seen a lot of success for this. Here's what it looks like in the dashboard. You essentially just go into an organization and you have a setup link that you can generate for both the identity provider, so for single sign-on, and also the directory provider for directory systems. You can regenerate these links if you want to recreate them. Like I said, they expire about a month after you create them, but you can easily recreate them as well. And then this is what it drops you into, the WorkOS admin portal. So to the IT admin, they just click that link, boom, they're in it. They can set up whatever identity or directory system they're using. So we're going to jump into a quick demo here with Vikram, who's a designer on the team, and I'll just let him take it away.
Hi, I'm Vikram Rojo, a product designer at WorkOS, here to talk about setup links. Onboarding new enterprise accounts with SSO and directory sync can sometimes be complicated. Walkthroughs and exchanging credentials with IT admins is a time-consuming manual process. To take the pain out of onboarding accounts, we recommend using the admin portal. You might be familiar with it. It's a guided workflow that securely captures provider credentials. Until now, we've only offered a simple programmatic integration, but teams looking for a no-code solution to onboarding accounts can now use shareable setup links from the dashboard. Here we have an organization page in the dashboard. The setup link can be generated and shared through typical communication channels, email, Slack, or even an onboarding document. Every team onboards enterprise accounts a little bit differently. Once accessed, IT admins will see a selection of connection or directory providers. Note that their access is limited to a 30-day window or once the provider is configured. After choosing their provider, they'll be prompted to configure it in a step-by-step fashion. I'm going to speed through this process and jump right to the end. Once complete, you'll notice that an active SSO connection or directory has been added to your dashboard. It's a one-time configuration link that you shared, and it cannot be reused. Lastly, when combined with our new support roles, your accounts team can manage onboarding entirely. And that's setup links.
All right, so we're really thrilled to be rolling this out. It's already live. If you want to start using it, it's in the dashboard. These setup links can also be custom branded, so we are able to generate them on a URL that has your domain. We can also do this generally for the admin portal and put your logo in it. Please get in touch if that's something you're interested in. This, again, allows your customers, your IT customers, to self-serve, configure, and set that up. And now you can use the admin portal without writing any code. So if you've been wondering if you should try adopting the admin portal or how it would work into your workflow, definitely recommend checking this out inside of WorkOS and trying it with a few of your customers. I think you'll be surprised at how much of a difference it makes when onboarding those users. This is Clinton from Sitefolio. He said setup links are brilliant. It just worked, saved us an hour of back and forth with customers. And you know, it really changes that from an hour to just sending a link overnight. So we're thrilled to be rolling this out. All right, let's keep going. A lot more stuff. We're going to talk about directory user custom attributes. So we're going to get really into the weeds here. So what does this mean? So when you sync in a directory, directories have users, right? And those users, we by default map in a bunch of the common things that people need when they're using directory data. Things like your first name, last name, email address, things like that. So we pull those in by default based on the directory system. But what if you want to expand that and add more and add something like what department someone's in, maybe what building they work in, what their t-shirt size is. Directories can be full of tons of different stuff. And this is even more confusing in enterprise systems because these directories can be customized per organization, per enterprise. So even if you have 2 or 3 companies using, say, they're all using Workday, they might choose to represent the department name differently across all this. And so we've built this really flexible mapping system that allows you to define custom attributes that you can sync into your application and take action based on that. And that's returned in things like webhooks and the directory systems. This is a little bit complicated to describe here, so we're just going to jump right in and show some screenshots and do a quick demo. So this is how you add directory custom attributes inside of your directory. So you do this inside of the WorkOS dashboard, and you essentially name a custom attribute. So in this example to the right, it would be a directory that you want to, for your app, for all of your users, you want to pull out things like manager ID, a job title, and department name. You can also make these required or optional. So maybe something like department name, it's okay if it doesn't exist, but you have to have job title and manager ID. So you set this up once inside of your application, and this would be for all of your users. And then when those directories are actually being added and created, then you do the mapping, and you map in the fields that are coming from the directory system to the fields that you need in your app. So pretty straightforward, but there's the setup experience that you need. For a demo of this, I'm going to hand this over to David, who had built a lot of this for the custom attributes mapping demo.
Thanks so much, Michael. Hi, everyone. My name is David, and I'm an engineer here at WorkOS. And today I'll be showing you how custom attributes for directory sync works. So as a quick reminder, by default, WorkOS maps a core set of information of users for directory sync in a standardized format. So if you need more fields than just those core attributes, we can use custom attributes. Let's say your app requires certain employee information like manager ID, job title, and if we can get it, department name. So first, you would define these attributes in the WorkOS dashboard, and then you have the IT admin for each customer map these fields in the admin portal. So let's walk through how this works. In the WorkOS dashboard, we can go to the left nav and click configuration, and the second tab is where we can add our custom attributes. So again, we wanted manager ID, we also wanted job title, and department name, if we can get it. So notice that by default, we require each of those attributes when we add them. But since we said department name is optional, let's go ahead and uncheck that box. So when the IT admin maps that field, then they won't be required to enter it. Okay, so let's say we land our first customer called Food Corp. We'll go ahead and create an organization to represent that customer. And then we'll use our nifty setup links feature to generate a setup link for their IT admin. So let's say I've DM'd or emailed this link out to the IT admin, and they've received it. So now I'm playing the role of Food Corp's IT admin, and I am pasting that link into my browser to set up the directory. Let's say Food Corp is using Rippling, so we'll select that, click Get Started, and then it's going to ask me to run through some instructions to get the API key, and we will paste our API key for our directory. And then now this is the step where you actually set up the mapping. So notice that these are the attributes that we defined in our WorkOS dashboard. And as the IT admin, I need to figure out how we can map them. So first, I'd probably go to the Rippling docs and see, okay, where can I get manager ID? There's a field called manager, and it represents the unique identifier of the employee's manager. Perfect. Let's go ahead and copy that over. And then next we'll do job title. And they have a field called title. So we'll map that over. And then department name is optional. So I can either skip this or try to map it. And lucky for us, we have department name. All right, so that completes the mapping. Go ahead and go to the next step. And voila, our directory sync is complete. So now when you either query this directory and receive webhook updates, you will get these custom attributes in a standardized format. That's it. Thank you.
So that's the demo for directory custom attributes. Sorry, it's a bit of a mouthful. Really excited about this, specifically because it really hands off the configuration step to IT, who is the actual one who knows how to map them, who knows what the fields should be. The benefit to you is this normalizes the data right out of the box. So when you define these custom attributes, you don't need to change your application as you're onboarding customers around those custom fields. They just get mapped into whatever you had set up originally in your WorkOS configuration. So IT admins can do this, and they don't even have to email you those values or anything. They can do it right there in the admin portal, right on their own as they're setting things up. And lastly, you can make these either required or optional. If there's some nice to have attributes that you want to sync in, you can do that as well. And for people that don't have them, they won't be blocked. They can still set up their directory. So we already have people using this in production. It's pretty slick. Want to keep moving forward because I know we have a lot more to cover still. And talk about dynamic SAML. This is a huge feature that we have launched. And it's really getting into the nitty gritty a little bit about SAML systems, but wanted to share this with you and show you kind of the level of depth that we go to in WorkOS to try to solve these really complex workflows. Okay, so SAML. So when you set up SAML, it's actually a pretty complicated process. Before we built this, the way, and this is how, for what it's worth, like everyone does it today. The ITMN gets the certificate and goes to something like Okta or OneLogin into their system and has to get this X509 certificate generated. And the certificate is essentially a key that's used to encrypt the SAML payload to validate the SAML session. You can think about it as kind of like a secret key. The thing is, certificates expire, and commonly these certificates could be, we've seen 1 year, 2 years, occasionally they're 5 years, but they always expire at some point. And it's good practice to have the certificates change, because you maybe want to roll the backend IT system for these companies. So the certificate gets uploaded, you get connected for SAML, but then 12 months later, the certificate expires. And when the cert expires and you can no longer sign that SAML assertion, users can't sign in. It breaks the authentication, which is obviously not what you want for these big customers. Most companies set this up, forget about it, especially if you're a fast-growing startup, you just don't even think about it. And then a year later or 2 years later, this stuff just breaks. And it's very, very frustrating and confusing. And you essentially have an outage for a really big organization. So we took this problem, we said, hey, what if we focused exclusively on trying to fix this for a few weeks? Like this really weird kind of edge case, but still pretty serious issue that can emerge. And what we built is something we call dynamic SAML. So instead of setting it up by generating the certificate, we can do it through something called a metadata URL, which is mostly standardized. We've worked with a lot of different vendors and providers to get the standard format in. And that certificate is then generated through that URL. We can pull that in. And then 12 months later, when that certificate expires, we're able to renew and refresh that certificate with a future cert that expires in the future. So with this new system, essentially the certificate is never fully expiring, so you're always being able to get a new one. You don't have that outage. It's a much more robust integration for your customers. This is what it looks like when you set it up and configure it. You put in the metadata URL, and this is something provided by IT admins that they can put in and save and configure it. And the previous version, which is still available to you, is that you can set this up manually. And that includes things like the IDP URI, the IDP SSO URL, and the certificate here in many different formats that you could have to upload. So I think that this is probably most useful to switch into a demo as well, so you can see this end to end, see what the experience is actually like. So I'm going to swap over to Michael Hadley, who's going to walk us through it.
Hi, I'm Michael, an engineer at WorkOS. Today I'd like to tell you about the improvements we've made to the workflow for managing SAML-based SSO connections. If you've worked with SAML before, you already know that there's information that every connection requires to be correctly configured. At the least, these include the IDP entity ID, the IDP SSO URL, and the X509 certificate. Manually entering these values can be error-prone, as it's possible to copy and paste the wrong value, or in the case of X509 certificates, there are many file types like PEM, DER, or CER, which only adds to the confusion. Thankfully, there is a better way. There's a standard way to share this information, known as the SAML Metadata specification. And don't worry, we're not going to be reading any specs today. However, we've added first-class support for SAML metadata in WorkOS, and we'd like to show that to you. So, first thing we'll do is we'll create an organization in the WorkOS dashboard. We'll add our organization domain, and next we'll create a connection. So we'll be working with Azure. And after we've created the connection, you can see we have this metadata configuration section. If we open that up, there's a single input. It's asking for metadata URL. In another tab, I've already set up an application in Azure. And if we go down here to the SAML signing certificate section, you can see there's this metadata URL value. So we can copy that, come back to the WorkOS dashboard and save it. And instantly our connection is configured. We extract the various fields down here from the metadata so you can see them. So we have the IDP entity ID, the SSO URL, and we show which certificates were in the metadata. So this one had one certificate, and we show the expiration dates. One nice thing about using metadata URLs is that WorkOS can actually detect when a certificate is about to expire, refetch the metadata from that URL, and if there is a newer certificate, replace the old one, all without requiring any intervention from you or your customers or having to ask your customers for newer certificates. So that's one nice benefit. So this is great if you're creating connections for your customers in the dashboard. But it's even better if you're using Admin Portal, as they can perform all these steps themselves. And we've added SAML metadata support in Admin Portal as well. So let's take a look at that. So first thing I'll do is delete this connection. And we'll use the handy portal setup links to initiate an Admin Portal session. And just like before, we'll create an Azure connection. And I've already performed most of these steps. I will need to copy it over the new SAML information here. So do that real quick and save it. And then we can continue to move through the steps. I've already mapped my attributes, and I've already assigned a user to my application. So just like in the dashboard, we get to this step where we ask the IT admin for just the metadata URL. So they can come back over here, and we'll copy that just like before, paste it here, and connection is configured. So let's try testing single sign-on. And it works, great. They can also view similar information here in the admin portal. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is that if for any reason you or the IT admin do not want to set up their connection using metadata, we still offer the manual fallback. In particular, this might be useful for generic SAML connections where you might have a proprietary identity provider that doesn't support publishing their metadata, either through URL or XML file. So we still have that. And that's SAML metadata. We think it will simplify your SAML workflows for creating connections, and hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
All right, so that's the demo for the new dynamic metadata setup for SAML configurations. It's super fast to configure and connect. It's automatically will continue fetching new certs, and this even supports many different proprietary SAML providers we've tested it with. If none of this really stuck with you, if it's all over your head, I think the TLDR of this is like goodbye certificates. You don't have to think about certs. You don't have to be emailing back and forth these files ever. IT admins don't have to think about certs, just like no more certificates, just with the URLs. It's faster to set up and more robust. So those users that you're onboarding can stay customers for many years to come with no issues. So that's dynamic SAML. This is Sam from Planetscale, who's the CEO of Planetscale. They're a relatively recent WorkOS customer. And he said, when I asked the team, how's the experience with WorkOS? They were just like, this is incredible. It's one of my favorite quotes. So thanks, Sam, for being a customer. We're really, really thrilled to be supporting you. Okay. Star of the show, in a way, let's talk about multi-factor authentication. So this is a brand new feature that we are launching, and I'm really excited to have Zeno Roca present this, who leads developer experience on our team. So we'll do a little switcheroo and welcome Zeno.
Thank you, Michael. I'm super excited to talk about multi-factor authentication, or MFA for short. This is a feature that we have been working for the last, I don't know, couple of weeks, and we're like super excited. And I think it's going to unlock a lot of benefits to you and your customers. So what is MFA, right? MFA is basically, in broad terms, is a combination of different things. Something that you know, and this is your regular email, your password as you're signing in that's the information that you have, that you know, and also something that you have. So this could be in many different forms, like your fingerprint. So in your computer, you just use your Touch ID, and then you can confirm that you are who you say you are, or you can use your phone and you can get an SMS, or you can use TOTP that we're gonna talk in a little bit, or even a hardware device like a YubiKey, where you can also prove your identity. And once you have those two things combined, then you can have access to a system. So that's MFA in broad terms. And how do we see this manifested in different apps? So you've probably seen this in many different places, in different forms with different factors. iCloud is a good example. You sign into your Apple account, and then they use your other devices, your computer. If you're on your phone, you can get that information from your computer. Same with GitHub. You can use a YubiKey, or you can use some authenticator app like 1Password or the Google Authenticator. And this is a pretty common flow, and probably one of the most required features from IT admins to ensure that users are going to have a strong security presence on their system. So we built an MFA API, and we tried to approach this from a very composable and opinionated way. So instead of being attached to a specific IDP, instead of being really opinionated in terms of like how you should manage backup codes and that kind of thing, we decided to be really unopinionated, and also make it in a way that you can plug this into any existing app, plug this into any session management strategy that you're using, instead of being attached to something else. So this is the integration flow that you're going to go over with. There are basically 3 different steps. You're first going to create your authentication factor, then you're going to challenge it, and finally, you're going to verify that that challenge really is what you're trying to verify. Now, there are 2 different strategies that you can take with this MFA API. We're definitely going to expand the number of factors that we're going to support in the future, but this is what we're starting with. You can choose between SMS, or you can choose between a time-based one-time password or TOTP. Now, let's look at the code and see how this works in practice. So let's say I want to enroll a user using the SMS factor. So I can just make a request to the WorkOS endpoint. I can send what is the type, what is the phone number, and in return, the response that I get is this authentication factor ID that I can reuse this later. So keep this in mind. This is going to be important information for the next step. So here's what the UI looks like. Okay, let's say I'm building this app and I want to start supporting SMS. This is how what you typically do. So you have a field for adding your phone number, some form submission to trigger the SMS, and then after that, you're going to add the one-time passcode. Okay, but what about TOTP? Let's say I'm using Google Authenticator or 1Password. How does that look like? So this is the API. Same contract, we're just changing the type from SMS to TOTP. And I also need to pass some more information like the company who's issuing that, the organization name, or the user as well. And what I get in return from this API is the QR code that you can use to display in your app, and also the URI that you can add to your Authenticator app. So let's see how this would look in an app. So this is what you typically display: your QR code, the passcode, and that's it. That's the first step. Now that we have created an authentication factor, we can move to the next one, which is challenging that factor. So how does that look like for the SMS? That's basically it, right? Like for the UI, you're adding that one-time passcode, and then you're registering that device. So let's take a look at the code now. The interesting thing about the SMS is that you can also change that template. So we give you that option to change the message to whatever you want. And we're going to reuse that same authenticator factor ID from the previous step to make sure that we're challenging the right one. Same for TOTP. So now we can add that passcode to our app, and same API. We're just sending that authentication factor in. In this case, there's no template, but same API, same endpoint, and all that. And now we move to the last step. So we have created the authentication factor. We challenged it, and I configured my account as a user. What happens next? Now that I log out and a week later, I'm logging into this app, how does it work to verify that that user really is who they're saying they are? So we can verify that using the Authenticator app, for example, and this is the API that we would call. So the idea here, regardless of using TOTP or SMS, is that you can call this API with the code that the user added, and then we can use the authentication challenge ID that we saved previously on our database to make sure that this user is who they say they are. To show all of you this and to go more into detail, I'm going to hand it over to Rob, who's going to demonstrate that for us.
Hi, this is Rob. I'm an engineer here at WorkOS. Today I'll be demonstrating the capabilities of our new MFA API by showing you an example application with MFA capabilities that are powered by the new API. The example we'll see today can be built using only 3 MFA API endpoints. The API is designed to be unopinionated and composable, and it should be compatible with existing authentication strategies found in your own applications today. Our example application is called HireOS, and we'll start off by signing in with a user who has not yet configured MFA. As we can see, there's 2 available additional factors of authentication that have not yet been configured. One is the Authenticator app, which leverages time-based one-time passwords, or TOTP for short. The other is SMS. Let's click Configure on the SMS factor. First, we'll need to provide a phone number to send the text message to, and then I'll click Send One-Time Passcode to enroll the phone number. Once I receive the message on my SMS-enabled device, I can type in the code provided. Now I'll click Register, and now it's configured. So let's log out and see how that impacts the login flow. Sign in with the same email and password as we did before. And then now we'll get another text message with another one-time passcode, which I'll type in now. I'll click Verify, and now we're logged in again. But what if I wanted to use an additional factor of authentication that's a little more modern and secure than SMS? Let's click Configure on the Authenticator app. We see a QR code, which most Authenticator apps support scanning. The app that I'm going to be using today is 1Password, but you can use any Authenticator app that supports time-based one-time passcodes. So I'll go ahead and scan the QR code, and then type in the code generated by the Authenticator app. And I'll click Register. And now we have both enabled. So let's log out one more time to see how that impacts the login flow. So one more time, sign in with the same email and password. And now it's asking us to input the code generated from our Authenticator app. And because we have SMS configured as well, the app gives us an option to switch to that authentication factor instead. But I want to use the Authenticator app. So I'll go ahead and type in the code generated by 1Password. And then I'll click Verify. And now we're logged in. And that's it. We have an example that is MFA enabled, leveraging only 3 WorkOS endpoints. The MFA API is currently in a preview stage and is available today. Just let the WorkOS team know, and we can get you set up with the new MFA API. Thanks.
All right, thanks so much for that demo. And thank you, Zeno, for running us through that. So that's the new MFA API. We're super excited to roll this out. Again, to reiterate, it's very composable. So the MFA API can be added to any existing authentication system you have. If you already have username and password auth and you just want to add MFA to it, it's really easy to do that way. It's also unopinionated in the sense that it doesn't force you into any one strategy or another. It's very flexible. And in particular, you can build your own UI around this. And so the UIs that we showed in that demo are things that, we created quite quickly in the demo apps. You can go see that code. But if you want to style it slightly different, if you want to have it match your login experience, your brand, you can totally do that. You have full control. It's not kind of locked within a UI that we're forcing you to use. So it's very unopinionated, composable, and also just really fast to integrate. You saw how simple the API endpoints are. We hide a lot of complexity behind that, so you don't have to think about it, and just give you a nice surface area to build against. We've had this out in a preview state with a few customers for a bit, and have had some pretty great success for it. This is Praneeth that said, leveraging WorkOS, we're able to build MFA via TOTP in a record week's time and are ready to engage with the customer, which is a big win for them, big win for us. So thanks, Praneeth, for being an early user, helping us kick the tires on this. Today, MFA, this is available. So please just let us know if you want us to turn on your account. We have it in a preview state, but it's in production, it's ready to go. And we'll be, opening it up to everyone very soon. But if you're interested in using this, please just shoot us a note in Slack or over email, and we'll turn it on for your account. So those are our features today. We went over a lot of stuff. Just a quick recap. Everything here from new providers, new integrations, both SCIM and SSO, to new additional features for customer support folks, people in customer success roles, including that support role, and also setting up SSO with setup links. We went through the custom attribute mapping for deeper and kind of more sophisticated directory integrations and mapping, and also talked about the metadata management, the dynamic SAML configurations for certificates, and how that'll just make your application more robust. And of course, last, we just talked about the new MFA APIs that we're thrilled to be rolling out. So there's a lot of stuff here. The team has been working super hard over the last few months on all these features. There's a lot of also small things that we didn't talk about today. There are small bug fixes and improvements and small things that we've shipped over the last several months. So just a quick shout out to everyone on the WorkOS team that's been pushing this stuff forward tirelessly. Last thing I wanted to talk about really quickly before we switch over to the Fireside chat is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. In the last few months, WorkOS became a carbon neutral company. And this means that all employees and all travel in the organization is fully offset through many different means to be carbon neutral, both in terms of reforestation, capture, and other mechanisms. Also, all of our tools and infrastructure we're offsetting, essentially everything on our P&L that we're looking at. And we did this as an organization going back to day one. So WorkOS, is a little over 3 years old right now, just as an organization. And we actually, this quarter became fully carbon neutral since inception, since day one. So we're really proud of being able to do this and really excited about being able to build a company with this as a principle. If you've ever considered kind of as an organization or a company becoming carbon neutral or investigating it, I definitely encourage you to do it and to try to build your organization around this for longevity of the planet and the future. So super excited about that, and just wanted to let you all know. Okay, and with that, let's wrap up. We're really excited to have Daniel here as a guest for a quick fireside chat. Daniel is a co-founder and CTO of Drata, which I'll let him introduce in just a second. And bear with me as we switch over the screen share. And I think Daniel is here right now, hopefully. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's see. Thanks so much for joining us. This is really exciting.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Mentioned a few times Drata as a company, was hoping that you could give us a quick introduction to the company in your own words. You guys do a lot of different stuff and have grown and changed a lot as you've grown. So give us the latest summary.
Sure. High level, Drata helps companies automate their compliance posture really, well, not compliance posture. We help your compliance goals. And by doing that, we automate a lot of the evidence gathering and organization of that, which, eventually outputs towards the reciprocal side of a lot of these security compliance frameworks, which is you get an annual audit. And in that process, if anyone's ever gone through it, it's a lot of tedious back and forth. And, because an auditor, a human, isn't sitting next to every one of your employees throughout the year understanding what you're doing. So you eventually do have to show this evidence to the auditors. How did you operate your business against your kind of business controls, and kind of what those are, like, hey, this is how we're going to operate our company. And the question is okay, prove to me that you operated that. And so in that, imagine how would I do that if, an auditor isn't sitting behind my shoulder every, throughout the year. Is, a lot of times people use screenshots and tickets and emails and et cetera. And we try to automate and gather all of that from tools like AWS or GitHub or Jira or background check providers and et cetera.
And Drata is a relatively new company too. Can you quickly tell us like how long it's been around, kind of how fast you've grown? I know there's been some news sort of recently.
Yeah, it hasn't been too long. I think we're about 20 months in now. We started in the middle of 2020. We were heads down kind of in stealth mode till the end of the year. We launched in beta with a couple beta customers in late November, which was fun. We were our first customer. That's always fun. And, use our own tool to get our own SOC 2 report. And then we launched publicly in the middle of January of 2021. So we recently just hit the year mark. In that year, it was a crazy, amazing year. And not only from growth of our team and product, but of customers as well. We also secured Series A and then a Series B as of last year, and have grown to unicorn status, which is always fun as a company. So we've been growing fast, and I think that unprecedented growth rate has really helped us shape this world of security compliance automation, and showing people a better way. And not only just hitting a tool and setting and forgetting it, but really the partnership approach that we've taken with our customers to not just say, here's a tool, good luck, it'll automate everything. Is, some things, these processes are human interactive, and everyone is nuances of it, and not everyone uses AWS as an example in the same way. And so there's a lot of times, very in-depth questions, and we have a lot of expert auditors and compliance experts on staff to help our customers. And, that's kind of part of the offering in there. So we really kind of, in a way, handhold people through, but at the same time, use the software to automate it as it goes through. So we're here to help, humanistically, but have software to automate as much as possible.
That's some tremendous growth, extremely fast. And I know that, 20 months ago, there were already a few people kind of in the space building compliance tools. I mean, it's something several folks have been working on. As you looked at starting a company here and building something, how did you think about approaching, not a greenfield market where there's nothing, but where there's already some competitors, potentially well-funded?
Yeah.
How did you see like entering into that kind of market, and also what the opportunity was for you to do differently?
Yeah, definitely. It was so funny. Just as any other entrepreneur, right? You get this idea, you think it's the best thing in the world, and it's like, no one's doing this. And then, as you go into the product market research, you're like, holy cow, 7 other companies are doing this. That's how it works. Like, I did, honestly, when we came up with the idea, going through pains of our last business, and that's kind of where it came from, was doing this manually and then working. So I had a educational technology company in the past called Portfolium, and we went through that motion, and we sold to universities. And like every time the CIO or something like that would be like, let me see your SOC 2 report or something along those lines, and we didn't have it early days. And so eventually we went through that motion, and did it, and did the whole spreadsheet Jira ticket thing, rip engineers off the roadmap. And it was an expensive process for a younger company. We had about 40 employees. And in that process of that business, we sold and merged with Instructure, the makers of Canvas, a pretty large educational technology company. And I was so excited as like an engineer myself and the engineering leader, like, oh man, I've never actually worked with this is a big, like 2,000 something person company. Like, let's go work with this amazing security team. And they are amazing. And they taught me a lot in the security side and compliance side, how they manage it all. But like, they were still doing it by hand. And it was like, whoa, something is majorly wrong here. Like, I was in startup mode, like with Portfolio, but at this, bigger multinational company, it was really shocking to see they were still doing it, Jira ticket spreadsheets, things like that. So as that's kind of where the entrepreneurial bells, I think, started ringing again for me. And, as we dove in after merging those companies and parting ways, it was Adam, my co-founder, we loved working with each other, and hey, what were some problems that we faced, and this is what it was, and all roads kind of led to this idea. And we're like, this is unbelievable. We can help engineering and security teams. We can help the sales and go-to-market teams like get these certs faster to sell up market and grow their companies faster. And as we like go do that product tour, you start finding, oh, okay, there's a competitor here that does something similar. And oh, wow, that's maybe like really close to what we do. And so you kind of, you dive in and you understand, okay, what does this company do? Exactly, like what are their customer bases, who are they going after? Maybe let's try to talk to some of those customers through 1, 2, 3 degrees separation. What do they like, what do they not like, and understand the approaches of these competitors in the space. So that's kind of what we did, and from there we took our own spin and approach. I've been a long time entrepreneur in my career, and from B2C companies to B2B companies, and always kind of took that product and design led kind of approach on the product side first, and then more so at the business, the customer obsessed kind of centric approach. So I would say that's what we did differently, is we like really put the end user at the center of our business and said, this buyer, this user, they need to trust us indefinitely. Like we're going to be holding the metadata of their security posture. Their like trust needs to be at the center of this business. And so, that is our number one, value of our culture and our company, it's trust. And so how that, gets communicated out through the marketing material to the onboarding process, to customer care, to product, to engineering. I even tell all of my engineers, like, every single keystroke you make in the code, think about how this could be broken or hacked or attacked. And so from day one, when knowing we're going to be building a cybersecurity company, we went above and beyond what most do. So when starting a company, usually when you start a company, it's just like go as fast as possible. Don't worry about whatever. But we did it right from the start in terms of security posture and processes, and getting a SOC 2 report before we even launched the business publicly and things like that.
I want to dive into what you said about engineering and design and the experience around that. This space around compliance is not necessarily seen as the place with the best design, or typically, seen as a beautiful products or elegant experiences built here. And yet Drata has been able to create an experience that's pretty delightful, to go through and simple and easy. How have you structured the team around that and kind of done that? I think that's something, and in this new world of B2B SaaS, a lot of companies aspire to bring sort of modern principles of design to legacy industries.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah. I think it just maybe naturally has came out of my like almost 20-year career here. And from building tools for Matt, we built one of my first companies that was big was it was called Tweet Photo, and we were the ones responsible for putting media onto Twitter. So they love me or hate me for that, but it's like it's like you build this product where millions and millions of users use it. It's like, okay, like we need to make it enjoyable, and like that leads into the next thing and leads into the next thing. And what I realized, especially with my last company, Portfolio, was we were writing software for students, and so in that a little younger, well, I guess older, millennials, and then into the Gen Z arena, it's like they're used to using these apps like Instagram or whatever, across the internet. And holy cow, these are there's this hundreds or 1,000-person product teams on these products that look beautiful, and they use it every single day for free. And it's like, that's what they're used to now. And so anything less, the bar has been raised so high for day-to-day usage in our interaction with technology, that I think anything less is doesn't matter what industry you're in. People they want better. And so I think if you can really take those patterns, those design patterns from the Instagrams of the world or whatever the tool is, it's and put them kind of into these B2B apps, people are used to it. And so those triggers in your brain they're comfortable, I'm probably misquoting the biology here, but your dopamine receptors kind of increase or whatever. And it's okay, this is enjoyable. And we've heard that time and time again. In general, security, it's that's the, oh man, that's the cost center in the business. That's the thing I don't want to touch with the 10-foot pole. You have the CISO or whoever in the corner, figuring it out for us. And it's usually internally kind of this weird divide between the company. And especially in the SMB, where if you're the busy CXO individual, and this is the last thing on your mind, maybe this is the 200th thing you did at of the day, it's midnight. Shoot, I gotta think about our compliance or security. And so what we wanted to do was bring security and compliance kind of, I mean, they're definitely different, right? Like just because you're compliant doesn't mean you're secure. Just because you're secure doesn't mean you're compliant. But by going through this compliance process, it makes you a better ran company. It makes you a more secure company. So that intersection is really strong. And so by doing it from day one and getting these early adopters or like these SMB leaders it really helps shape, I think, the culture of their business and really put security in the forefront, where they said, wow, Drata made security kind of fun. Wow, this is enjoyable. I've seen this time and time again now across our customer base. And this is what surprised me the most of starting this company, is that so many of our customers now, because they've used Drata, have put security as part of their core values of their business and their culture. And where before it was always this, side thing we'll do later. And so that's amazing, because for people like the actual individual of myself or you, like we're users of all these tools out there, and I don't want my data stolen. So to be able to like cultivate this culture that'll just, spread throughout the SMB space, throughout the B2B space. I mean, we have customers of all kinds of B2C to every industry and everything. So it's great to see, security, top of mind security come through these companies' culture, because the importance of that's just so relevant. I mean, holy cow, I think it was earlier this week, there was a giant state attack on some Israeli stuff. And, and a lot of times it's like, it relates to vendors, it relates to process, it relates to humans. Like sometimes we're all lazy and we forget to patch the server, or we forgot to click this one checkbox on AWS or whatever it was. And yeah, so how can we have a kind of a watchdog in a way, keep always checking you on that business process that you're running?
I certainly hope not only will that world of clunky old IT software go away. I think that's what you were talking about earlier. Like we're thankfully transitioning out of that. I think no one likes that. We're getting into better tools, but also every company having a stronger security posture and just taking it, from early days more seriously. Certainly what the world needs.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask more about your growth also. So obviously the product experience leads to people sharing it through word of mouth. And I know you had a lot of like earlier stage companies when you just got started, those design partners.
Yeah.
What has led to your large explosion of growth? Like what really has driven it? Kind of looking back, was there one specific thing you did, or kind of if you were talking to maybe another founder or entrepreneur hoping to have such growth, what would you recommend?
Yeah. I think at the core of it is, it maybe sounds a little cheesy or cliche, but it's really our culture of our business, and that culture of which centers around trust and like a competitive fire and some other items that we all not only we interview for, but that we live and breathe every day. I think that's what helps our acceleration and growth at every level, and putting that the customer at the center. So with that, it multiplies out of customers are happy, they're leaving reviews, they're telling their peers, they're telling their former employees. We've actually seen it time and time again. Maybe someone that was the champion or a user of Drata leaves their company and goes to a different company, and they're like, my first action is to bring Drata into this company. And so now multiply that over 20 months that we've been around. It's definitely been a great kicker. I mean, obviously hats off to the sales team and the marketing teams. Like, they're doing a phenomenal job, which is amazing. And obviously the engineering, the R&D org to support all that. But so those are, factors. And, I wouldn't really say it's one thing we did. I think it's, it's funny. I've told this to a lot of my peers. I've been building companies in San Diego for almost 20 years now, and I'm involved in the community out here. And, so I know a lot of people in the community, and entrepreneurship community, and they're like, wow, it's like, it's very positive, and like, hey, congratulations, you're doing all this amazing stuff, and that's great. And some of them ask me like, what did you do differently or whatnot? And sometimes in my head, I'm like, I didn't do anything differently. Like, we always wrote amazing code, we always wrote amazing product, we always put customers first. We have a killer marketing and sales team. But I think, a little bit to credit myself and my other peers, it's like, well, yeah, but we've also been like doing this now for 20 years. So the mistakes we made 20 years ago, 5 years ago, like, you know, it adds up. And you definitely have that saying, as you try to make yourself 1% better every single day. I mean, do that over a, you know, 15 plus year career. I think just naturally now I don't make those mistakes. And so I think a lot of that is like, and I think that's a lot of paths of a lot of entrepreneurs is, yeah, maybe your first one, you got lucky or you didn't, and you learn lessons. And where you see people find real success is like, you know, maybe 15, 20 years into their career. So I would say it's like that. It's just like a combination of 15, 20 years of you know, being in the grind and seeing every single thing you could see from a B2C company to B2B company, and it cultivated into this perfect storm of right market, in general, cybersecurity, right industry, or like industry, right market for compliance automation, timing of the market. I mean, sadly, the global pandemic is horrible, but it, from a business side, it has moved a lot of people to work at home, therefore heightening the IT teams around the world to take, you know, security a little bit more serious, as I can't control it now in my office. And so I think a lot of that, like everything kind of culminated into a perfect storm for us to see this type of growth.
Well, it seems like it's all continuing too. That kind of, those trends are not going away.
No.
Let's talk more about a little bit more about compliance. So SOC 2, I think a lot of people are familiar with SOC 2, SOC 2. People hear about it all the time. There's obviously other types of compliance and other ways that people approach this. Can you talk about how you see that industry, what Drata does, and kind of how you see the industry outside of maybe just getting that SOC 2, you know, certificate?
Yeah, you know, the SOC 2 cert is a great like validation that you're running a well-oiled machine. There's definitely different levels. For those who don't know, there's like 5 trust service criteria. The security one's the only, you know, required one. So you can kind of go deeper and show that you do more stuff, maybe around privacy or the processing integrity, like you are doing what you say you're doing, even at the code level. So those are, you know, great things to do. But I think it's like, once you have that report in hand, it's more of it's like a trust thing. Again, it kind of keeps coming back to trust. It's, as I talk to my upstream vendors or whatnot, is that it's not so much that I have this cert or this report. It's that it's like, oh, wow, these guys care about me. Like, these care about my users. And so I'm going to trust them. It's just like, you know, it's just building that trust from the start. So I think there's that, and that's an important thing. And it's definitely spidered. And, you know, roll back maybe 10 years ago, you hear it all the time. Oh, I have an RFP from Bank of America and I don't have the SOC 2 report and I don't even know where to start. And so, you know, those bigger financial institutions, that's definitely where it got started, right? I mean, it is the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Professional Accountants. So it's all around accountancy and finance and stuff. But, you know, it kind of has, there's a sector now in the SOC 2 report now versus the SOC 1, or more around compliance, security. And with the rise of SaaS and with the rise of clouds, it's like, how do I, you know, before I used to have servers in my office, or I have a colo and I control everything. We don't control anything. We're talking on Zoom here. I'm using Google or Slack to communicate, where, you know, my servers are in AWS, my code's in GitHub, etc. I don't own any of, I can't physically control it, but I can still deploy practices in my business to ensure it's a secure thing. So I think the SOC 2 report in general, even it's an American standard, is a great methodology to show that. The ISO 27001 cert is kind of that international like sister to that. It's very popular in European markets. I mean, around the world as well. I've noticed even around the world, though, people are accepting either, because I think the SOC 2 American kind of standard has become almost an industry standard. And those are great certs to go after, maybe where to start. I would say on one side, SOC 2 is a little bit more gray, and it's a little bit more open to interpretation. Therefore, if that's your first thing to start with, and you use a tool like Drata, it kind of gets you into the shape, because you can kind of shape your company to how you want to do it, and show, hey, you know, I'm different than maybe someone else. It's not cookie cutter. And it lets me kind of not break my processes too much, mold them a little, and then, you know, move forward. Where ISO 27001 is a little bit more rigorous. It's kind of, they have this like Annex A, and it's like, you know, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, and that's good. But I think what I've seen is it's better to start with SOC 2, and if you want to go more international markets and those international maybe partners are challenging you for an ISO cert, not a SOC 2 report, then okay, maybe move there. Recently, we've actually launched some privacy offerings around the GDPR space. CCPA is coming out soon, so everyone around the corner, which is great in the California world. But those, and then HIPAA launched a little later. It was I think in December at the time. I'm remembering that right. So the difference between the HIPAA laws, like around the Health Privacy Act, and GDPR and CCPA and those laws, I think that's the big difference, is that those are like laws and they're just compliances that you need to adhere to, not get a certificate, like an industry certification. So I think we're like SOC 2 and ISO go, it's like, okay, I want to go achieve this. And so I work up and I eventually do an assessment or whatever, and I get this certificate or report. Where HIPAA, if you're, even a startup from day one, like, and you're holding PHI, the personal health information, and you're a bioscience company, or you're helping some hospital build some SaaS tool or whatever, like you need to be HIPAA compliant from day one. And so that kills companies. Like if you're this young company, you're trying to build all this amazing stuff, and now I got to go shift gears and make sure we're HIPAA compliant, and how do I do that? So to make sure that you do that from day one, because it's not this cert you get, you need to be that from day one. It's I think tools like Drata and the way we help you automate it all and put you on your way there to really ever proving compliance in case you ever get tested down from the authorities or your clients. It just makes that world so much easier. So yeah, the law aspects around HIPAA and GDPR, I find those actually like super open greenfields for us as we move forward. We've been really focusing on like the industry certs like SOC 2 and ISO, but I think these privacy and health laws are really a new opportunity for us. Is how do we get from the youngest help startups to some of the biggest names out there.
Daniel, I have one last question for you before we wrap up. We're almost running out of time. You've been building startups and thinking about this for a couple decades now. Almost. Sorry, not to age you or both of us. With this company, I'm curious, like, what has been new that you have learned as you've been building this one in particular? And then also kind of looking back, what advice would you give the next generation of founders and entrepreneurs, maybe someone starting off at the first company that they're building?
Yeah. On the tech side, obviously that's my realm. There is always a sense of like, go. We don't have enough time to build the product or whatever. Just make sure you're doing the fundamentals correctly from the start. Like the way you're setting up your security and the way you're deploying your infrastructure. There's so much amazing software out there, from Terraform to others. And making sure that those security passes are just done from the start, and that's great. Hopefully, we're here for you, and we can get you on the way to SOC 2 or something to start. But more important is that you just take into consideration security and on at the application level, infrastructure level to start. I think that'll pay dividends in the long run. On the business side, what I would say to young entrepreneurs is really not only understand your market and whatnot, but what's the buyer journey? I think that's so critical, and really understanding who the customer is, who the buyer is, and how do they eventually become a customer, and then how's that handoff from the sales customer perspective into customer success, and tracking that along the way. Using tools like HubSpot or whatever are a little easier and cheaper than like a Salesforce, which maybe more bigger enterprises use. So I would say like get those like funnels and pipelines done right, and be extremely analytical on your data. I think it's some customer or some companies in the earliest, like we're just trying to close a deal, and you lose, then you fast forward 6 months or a year, and you lost all of that insight you got along the way in that funnel, and what worked here, what didn't, and why. And so as you bring in new people that weren't there in the beginning, they could always go back and see. One other tool I would recommend, and this has been a huge help for us, it does cost money, so you have to make sure you can pay for it, but we've been using a tool called Gong, G-O-N-G. It's like it records your calls, and there's a couple others out there, but it's been like instrumental. We've had it from day one, and from training new people that come on and re-listening to how things happen in sales calls and whatnot. So like something like that records every single customer call or prospect call that'd be a huge thing. Sorry, so that was like to a younger audience. To what I've learned about this company, what I've done differently, or what I've learned this time, I would say growing this fast is a little painful. Make sure you have time to not sleep, I guess. I think as of even, I forget the timeline, 5-6 months ago, I was like running HR, I was CTO, I was engineer, obviously founder and helping where I could there. But so making sure that you start thinking like for these major positions and major department heads, I would probably try to hire, if not 6 months ahead of it, like 3 months ahead of it, and get it, because by the time it's too late, it's already too late, and then you have to bring someone on, and by the time they're ramped up, it is a 3 to 6 month process. And so hire a little sooner. I think I wish we hired ahead of people a little sooner than we have. We actually have someone starting soon, which I'm super excited about, but that's been good. And I think it honestly just keeps going down to culture. That's where we learned a lot at my last company with Adam, my co-founder, and others, and not only understanding what the culture is of your company and how it works in the correspondence to your customers, but then how do you cultivate that throughout your company? How do you hire for that? How do you put the ownership of the culture on the employees, not the leadership? And that to me is what's paid dividends at the last business and this business. So even in those hard times where you're up at 2 a.m. on a Saturday just doing HR stuff, it's like you have this end in sight of this is where people can help me in this area, or this is where we're going. And I think just the culture of all of our employees now, from young to old, or from the earlier spots, people that started this week, man, it's infectious. It's fun.
I 100% agree with that. I feel like startups are all about hiring culture, just growth and hiring culture. With that, we can wrap up. Daniel, thanks so much for joining us. This has been really fun. Really excited to continue to see the growth of Drata. And I don't know, next time we chat, maybe you'll be a multi-billion-dollar company at the current rate.
Let's do it. And for everyone listening, WorkOS is a great tool. We're customers as well.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. We'll let you get back to running Drata. Thanks everyone for showing up and attending. This has been great. Take care. See you next time.